I was fast asleep when I was gently awakened by the sweet kisses of my beloved husband. I felt his warm, familiar breath against my skin as he tried to gently wake me up. Still drowsy, I smiled at him, enjoying the feeling of being wrapped in the soft sheets of our comfortable bed. It was one of those rare days when I was lucky enough to enjoy a well-deserved rest, away from the obligations of everyday life. It seemed as if time had slowed down just for the two of us in that peaceful moment. I wanted to enjoy every second in that wonderful bed, feeling protected and loved in my husband's arms. However, soft sunlight flooded into the room, reminding me that the outside world was waiting, full of possibilities and adventures. But for now, I allowed myself to sink further into the soft pillows, enjoying my husband's sweet company and the sense of peace that the day off was giving me at that moment. "Wake up, my love. Today is the most important day for me," he said, his voice full of energy and anticipation. "It's a perfect day outside for skiing, and I can't wait to share it with you. Let's enjoy it together," he insisted, with an infectious smile on his face. I smiled sleepily, feeling infected by his excitement, but also a little reluctant to get out of the cozy bed on that cold morning. However, Felipe's excitement was contagious, and I knew that he had planned this day with such care and affection that it would be impossible to refuse. With a resigned sigh, I finally sat up in bed, ready to face the day of adventures that Felipe had prepared for us. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, painting the room in inviting golden tones, while the aroma of fresh coffee floated through the air, promising an energizing start to our day. As soon as I put my feet on the floor, he looked at me tenderly and said, "Have I told you today that you're beautiful?" His sweetness warmed my heart and I smiled, feeling loved and special at that moment. It was amazing how he always found ways to make me feel special, even on the simplest of mornings. Still wrapped up in the comforting sensation of his compliment, I began to cheer myself up for the day ahead. With a smile on my lips, I got out of bed and hugged him warmly, grateful that he was by my side. I was ready to face the adventures that awaited us, knowing that, with him by my side, any challenge would be easier to overcome. Together, we prepared for the day of skiing that Felipe had been looking forward to, eager to create unforgettable memories and share moments of joy and love. It was the start of another exciting journey in our life together. We had only been married for 3 months and everything was still so fresh. It was all very quick, a real love at first sight. Soon after we met, he proposed to me and, in a brief ceremony, I accepted with all my heart. With each passing day, I felt more grateful for having found someone so special, someone I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. That morning, as we prepared for the long-awaited ski day, I thought back to the moments that had brought us there. From our first meeting to the moment we said yes to each other, every moment was marked by genuine love and a deep connection. I knew I had found my partner for life, someone with whom I could share all the joys and challenges that the future held. With a feeling of gratitude and excitement, I quickly got dressed and smiled at Felipe, my husband, knowing that the day would be filled with laughter, adventure and, above all, love. We were ready for Sky Day. Felipe asked if I had taken the equipment and I confirmed it, saying it was in the car. We then set off towards the house of our friends, Jenna and Marcos, where we had arranged to meet for the day of fun in the snow. When we got there, we were warmly welcomed by Jenna and Marcos. Jenna, in her animated way, turned to me with a mischievous smile and asked if Felipe would finally win the bet against Marcos this time. I smiled back and replied, "We'll see." Meanwhile, Felipe never missed an opportunity to brag about the times he had beaten Marcos in the sky, making it clear that he was confident in his abilities. In a relaxed mood and full of excitement, we prepared for another day of adventures in the snow, eager to create new memories with our friends. Everything was going very well. We were having fun, going down the snow slope, betting on who would get to the bottom the fastest. The atmosphere was one of pure joy and relaxation, until something strange happened. While we were playing, throwing snow at each other, Felipe hit Jenna in the face with a small snowball. Instead of apologizing immediately, as was to be expected, he stared at her with a frightening look that seemed almost predatory, as if he were observing his prey. His thoughts seemed far away, and Marcos and I looked at each other, not understanding what was going on. It was as if an expression totally unknown to me had taken hold of him at that moment. Suddenly, he seemed to wake up and said, "I'm sorry if I hurt you." But all that strange expression had us worried. What was going on there? It puzzled me, but he quickly gave me a tender kiss, making me forget that disturbing episode for a while. Everything went back to normal and we were ready to enjoy another day in that frozen paradise. We went back for lunch at a beautiful restaurant, from where we could see the highest snow-capped mountains. The place was simply wonderful, and the cuisine on offer was incredible. It was like a dream to be there with my love, enjoying such special moments together. Every moment spent there with our friends was incredible. We laughed together, shared stories, enjoyed the activities in the snow and made the most of every second of our stay. However, we decided to go back to the hotel to continue enjoying this wonderful day off. Felipe grabbed his car keys, Jenna and Marcos also went to their vehicle, and we headed back. Halfway there, while we were enjoying the snow-covered landscape and chatting animatedly, we began to notice signs along the road. They warned that the road was dangerous and recommended that we proceed with caution and reduced speed. The weather seemed to be changing and the snow was starting to fall more heavily, making visibility a little more difficult. Despite the warning signs, we continued our journey, confident that we would be careful behind the wheel. However, a feeling of apprehension began to set in as we made our way along the winding road. I clung to the armrest of the car, watching the snow fall and the white-capped trees flash past the glass. The tense atmosphere on the road contrasted with the relaxation and joy we had experienced during the day. At every turn, our hearts beat harder, aware of the possible dangers we could face. The snow accumulating on the sides of the road created a sense of isolation and vulnerability, increasing our worry. Even so, we remained calm and kept moving forward, maintaining a safe speed and paying attention to the road conditions. With every kilometer we traveled, we were relieved to be closer to the hotel, where we could take refuge from the impending storm. Little did we know, however, that the journey back would be full of challenges and unexpected surprises. Jenna and Marcos were just a few kilometers behind us, so we decided to call and warn them about the dangerous road conditions. We continued to drive slowly, taking extra care as the snow continued to fall heavily. The warning signs along the way echoed in our minds, constantly reminding us of the imminent dangers. At a very narrow bend, the tension reached its peak when we were surprised by a gray snow wolf, emerging from the dense white curtain that surrounded us. The animal, imposing and frightening, left us paralyzed with terror. Felipe and I screamed with panic as we tried to process the scene before us. In a desperate attempt to avoid the wolf, Felipe slammed on the brakes, but the car, already sliding on a thin layer of snow, lost control and began to spin out of control. The vehicle overturned violently, throwing us into the car like rag dolls on a roller coaster. The world around me spun into a blur of snow and twisted metal. The deafening sound of metal crashing against snow echoed in my ears, and my vision blurred as the car continued its frantic spiral. For a brief moment, everything was silent, as if time had frozen in an instant of chaos and despair. Then a feeling of heaviness and darkness enveloped me, as if I were sinking into a sea of troubled dreams. My mind, unable to cope with the magnitude of what had just happened, sank into a deep sleep, taking me away from reality and the consequences of the accident. I was in a deep sleep when I finally began to emerge into consciousness, feeling as if I were floating in a sea of mist. A strange, uncomfortable sensation filled my body when I noticed a tube in my mouth, making it difficult to breathe. I tried to move, but my joints felt heavy and unwilling to obey my commands. The sounds around me were a cacophony of beeps and buzzes, coming from the various medical devices that surrounded me. My vision was still blurred and I struggled to open my eyes fully. However, when I finally managed to focus, I was confronted with a heartbreaking scene next to me. Jenna was sitting in an armchair, her head resting on Marcos's shoulder, both of them visibly shaken and crying silently. Their tense, worried faces said more than 1,000 words, leaving me even more confused and apprehensive. I couldn't understand what was happening. Where was I? What had happened to me? The questions swirled in my mind, but my voice was trapped by the tube in my mouth, unable to express my fears and doubts. Amid the confusion and discomfort, a sense of panic began to seep into my chest, threatening to consume me as I struggled to understand my situation. When they finally realized I was awake, Jenna and Marcos shouted for the nurse to rush in. With a mixture of relief and concern on their faces, Jenna approached me, her words sounding like a distant echo amidst the whirlwind of confused thoughts that filled my newly awakened mind. The nurse soon arrived, moving with professional agility to remove the tube blocking my mouth. The feeling of freedom that came with its removal was indescribable, as if I were coming back to life again. Breathing became easier, and a slight relief spread throughout my body. However, even with the tube gone, I was still dazed and unable to articulate coherent words. Jenna and Marcos approached, anxious to know if I remembered anything of what had happened. My memory was hazy, but little by little, fragments of the event began to emerge from the abyss of my confused mind. I vaguely remember that winding bend, the gray snow wolf and, finally, the terrible overturning of the car. As my mind struggled to put together the pieces of the puzzle of that fateful afternoon, a feeling of dread and unease began to settle in my heart as I came to terms with the seriousness of the situation we were in. When I remembered Felipe, my heart raced and a wave of worry washed over me. Faintly, I asked Jenna about Felipe's whereabouts, with a growing urgency in my voice. Her gaze met Marcos's before she approached, her eyes brimming with tears. In a choked voice, Jenna gave me the devastating news: during the car rollover, an iron had pierced Felipe's body, and he hadn't survived the impact. Her words echoed in my ears like an unexpected blow, the reality of the abrupt and relentless loss of my husband not yet fully unfolding in my stunned mind. It was inconceivable. Only moments before, we had been enjoying a moment of leisure and happiness together, and now, in an instant, everything had been ripped away from me. The pain of loss was mixed with shock and confusion, leaving me without a floor and unable to fully comprehend what was happening around me. Shrouded in despair, I felt myself sinking into an abyss of anguish and uncertainty. The doctor, who had just arrived, broke the oppressive silence with words that sounded distant and unreal: "You're alive by a miracle, Helena." The gravity of the situation began to settle in on me, as I struggled to process the enormity of the tragedy that had befallen us. As the days passed, I slowly recovered in hospital, but the pain of losing Felipe continued to weigh on me like a constant shadow. I couldn't even watch over his body, trapped in that hospital room, immersed in a deep mourning that seemed to have no end. Every moment was a battle against the overwhelming sadness that flooded my soul, as I struggled to find some way of moving on without my beloved husband by my side. Then, one day, the doctor came into the room with news of my condition. According to the tests, I was ready to continue my recovery at home. The prospect of leaving the hospital environment was both comforting and frightening, as I knew I would have to face the reality of life without Felipe in the world. Jenna and Marcos, always present and supportive, came to pick me up with forced smiles of happiness, trying to cheer me up with the idea of returning home. However, the emptiness inside me seemed so great that I could hardly find solace in the prospect of returning to that house which now seemed so empty and bleak without my husband. So I left behind the place where so many happy memories were created, but also where I experienced the most tragic moment of my life. As we set off towards our new home, far away from that place marked by pain and suffering, I knew that I would carry the horrible memories of that fateful trip with me forever. After finally arriving home, when I opened the door, the familiar smell flooded my nostrils, bringing up a wave of overwhelming emotions. The tears came uncontrollably, and I found myself sinking into the despair of the loneliness that now stretched out before me. Jenna, understanding and supportive as ever, wrapped me in a comforting hug, offering to stay by my side and help me through this difficult time. As she spoke words of comfort, I could remember the rare moments of happiness I had shared with Philip, a painful but precious memory. Feeling the need to be alone to process my grief and get used to the new reality, I asked Jenna to give me some time alone. She readily agreed, promising to be available if I needed her. So I stayed alone in that now dark house full of memories, facing the harsh reality of my widowhood and trying to find the strength to move on, even in the face of the immensity of the emptiness that now inhabited my heart. I was inconsolable and picked up his clothes, smelling his perfume and remembering him all the time. When one of the buttons on his blouse fell to the floor, I bent down to pick it up and I saw a well-hidden box with a padlock. I immediately thought it was his fishing equipment and I opened it to remember, and as soon as I opened it I saw all the lures, everything he liked best, but when I moved it I saw a false bottom. When I came across those pages, my heart froze and my legs went weak. On one of the pages of Felipe's diary, I saw a newspaper clipping with the image of a man wanted for being a serial killer, responsible for the brutal murders of women with whom he was in a relationship. My world seemed to collapse in the face of that disturbing revelation. It was Felipe in the picture. An overwhelming mixture of sensations overwhelmed me. Despair overtook me as I realized that I had been so close to a murderer, sharing my life with someone capable of committing such atrocities. At the same time, however, a wave of gratitude washed over me for not having been one of that monster's victims. With trembling hands, I picked up the phone and called Jenna and Marcos, my closest friends. The shock in their voices was palpable when I shared with them the shocking discovery I had made in Felipe's diary. They were both horrified by the revelation, unable to believe what they were hearing. Today, I don't want to allow anyone into my life without knowing their true identity and family background. I've learned a valuable lesson from all this. I realize that I could easily have been another victim of that serial killer. This experience has made me understand the importance of getting to know the person with whom I share my life. I can't allow myself to be blinded by love or appearance, ignoring the warning signs that could indicate imminent danger. I have therefore decided to be more discerning in my personal relationships, seeking to know more about people's backgrounds and character before getting deeply involved. Safety and peace of mind now have priority in my life, and I will do everything possible to protect my physical and emotional integrity. The moral of this story is that, however intense love may be, it is crucial to truly know who is by your side. We shouldn't ignore the warning signs or allow the desire for a relationship to blind us to a person's true nature. Safety and authenticity should be priorities in any relationship, and it's essential to be on the lookout for signs that could indicate potential dangers.